Well, after waiting for over a year for it to come back in stock, I'm making what I think will be the ultimate upgrade for my DW 9000 pedals, swapping out the default drive shaft with a version made by a company called Trick. The DW 9000 pedals, they come with what DW refers to as the Linkage Drive Assembly with red ends. This is the same version that comes with the DW 5000 pedals and is supposedly better than the black ends version that comes on the 3000 and 7000 pedals. So what makes the Trick version of this so much better? Well, the ends use roller bearings, which should provide a much smoother performance. We'll check that in a minute, but first let's go over some of the other pluses on this drive shaft that aren't so obvious. First and foremost is the price point. When I picked this up, it was actually $10 cheaper to upgrade to the Trick version than it would have been to replace with the DW stock red end version. DW does also offer a bearing version of their drive shaft that comes on their machined pedals, but the Trick version is actually half the price of that. Another significant improvement is that the Trick version has more reach. In the past, I've had to modify my DW drive shaft because I couldn't get the pedals out far enough. What I did was I replaced one of the rods or one of the key stock pieces. They're usually 6 inches, and I had to replace it with an 8.5-inch piece. And that was just so I didn't have to have my left leg kind of awkwardly underneath my snare. But the Trick version is at least 2.5 inches wider or longer, so I don't have to modify my drive shaft anymore. You can also tell that this thing is really heavy duty. Usually DW, they're the ones known for having really robust hardware, but I feel that in this case, they're really outshined by Trick. Besides how involved the linkages are, you can tell that the whole thing is a lot thicker, and that does translate into a lot more weight. Also, the retractable rods on the Trick version are hex or 6-sided, as opposed to the DW version, which I mentioned are using a square key stock. Now, of course, the true magic on these are the roller bearing linkages. DW's linkages, they have a single point of motion. So there's at one point where they move left to right and up and down. The Trick version of this separates the motion to 2 different areas. Closest to the pedal is where it moves left to right, and just further in from that is where it moves up and down. Where the linkage connects to the pedal, that's actually also been improved. DW's version, it has 1 point that you would tighten to hold it on, but the Trick version has 2 places. Hopefully that'll have a much tighter grip. I have had a couple of times when I was playing a show where if my left pedal moves slightly, it got loose, and believe me, you don't want your left pedal disconnecting in the middle of a song. I should probably also mention that the Trick version, it doesn't attach on quite all the way onto the pedal. So this part here is not as deep on the Trick version. This might actually be one negative for Trick because the DW version does connect on all the way. But as you can see here, when you have the Trick version on, there's a little bit of a gap. Jumping back to the positives, I think the Trick version may actually stay cleaner. DW, their version of the linkage, that universal section is very open, so it's easy for dust and sawdust from your sticks to get in there. So not only do you have to occasionally clean it, re-oil it, but that debris being in there and then applying that motion against that debris is going to wear down that linkage. And myself, I've actually had to replace my linkage on my drive shaft, my DW version, several times over the years. The Trick version, though, is fairly closed in, so I'm hoping that A, I don't have to spend so much time on maintenance, and B, that the life of this will far extend that of the DW version. The real burning question, of course, is how does the Trick version perform against the DW version? As you can see in this little side-by-side comparison, the Trick version does perform better. It has a longer amount of time that the left pedal moves freely. I'll also say, keep in mind, it's kind of hard to judge the action of this by just the short tests that I've done with it. But I would say that the action on the Trick version feels at least a little bit smoother than the DW version. Now, I do have 2 other minor gripes about the Trick product. The first is they really need to put a piece of tape on the top of their box. I had this shipped to my house, and I opened up the shipping box. Inside was the product box, and that product box had come open. The drive shaft was partly sticking out of the box. This was not a great first impression because now I'm suddenly worried about whether or not there was any shipping damage. Thankfully, there wasn't. There's also one feature that's missing on the Trick version that is on the DW version, a memory lock. On DW's version, I can easily take one of the linkages out of the middle section, throw it in a gig bag, get to the gig, put them back together, and thanks to the memory lock, I always have the same exact perfect setting for the width or length between my two pedals. But Trick, their version doesn't come with a memory lock, so I'm definitely going to have to look into making one before I take this on the road. Besides the drive shaft, something else you might have to replace on your DW pedals is the hinge, because sometimes that breaks. And everything you need to know about replacing the hinge can be found right over here. Until next time, peace.